This is TWiT.
Okay, so Apple just updated its developer program to further crack down on developers who are abusing some of its API features, which are being used to collect data on user devices. And they're doing that as an underhanded means of tracking them online. Apple said that even if a user has given an app permission to track their activity, fingerprinting the underlying device is still not allowed, yet it is still going on. So with the release of iOS 17 and macOS Sonoma this fall, developers who want to continue to have access to these features, which could and have been used to enable persistent device-level tracking, are going to have to provide a valid reason to Apple for having that right. Apps that don't provide a good reason will not be accepted on the App Store as soon as iOS 17 rolls out and Apple begins to enforce this policy. And Leo, I'm astonished by the apparent value added by this tracking. I mean, tracking, it must be that it provides so much more benefit to advertisers above and beyond just, putting their ad on a page where it makes sense for their ad to appear.
Well, I have strong opinions about this. Advertisers think it provides value. There's a lot of evidence that personalized ads don't, in fact, work better. But
I agree.
Yeah, but if you're an advertiser, think about it. You would. I mean, there's a famous saying that I know that half of my ads work. I just don't know which half. They would love some idea that they're hitting an audience that's interested in buying, for instance. They haven't been able to. On TV, you really can't do that if you buy network television.
Right.
That's why it's mostly brands on network television. They know, well, we're enhancing the brand Pepsi or Budweiser, and so that $1 million ad on Super Bowl is worth it. But for podcasts and websites and a lot of the digital world,
where you have some targeting,
you can target. Facebook and Google live on this, and it makes them feel better. I don't know if there's a third category of advertising, which is the advertising we do, which is called direct response advertising. That's why we always have a URL, or on late night TV you'd see an 800 number or an offer code. That's another way of an advertiser kind of reassuring themselves that their advertising is working. They're all imperfect, and all the studies I've seen say that tracking is not a very effective way of, that targeting your ads doesn't really make that much of a difference. But advertisers believe it, and maybe even if they know better, the agencies need something. They're grasping at straws.
Maybe what's happened is that this is all to support that sketchy data broker business.
No. I think that's a wonderful side business for the companies that sell it. But remember, Google doesn't sell to data brokers. Facebook doesn't sell to data brokers. But they do.
So they're doing it for their own purposes.
They're doing it for
only internal.
Well, they're doing it because advertisers demand it. That's why we do it. We do very limited tracking. As you know, a podcast, it's impossible to know with an RSS feed anything but the IP address of the visiting computer. And we don't do more than that. But we do use services, a variety of different services. Right now we're using something called pod sites, that they're an independent third party. We send them the IP addresses of people who listen to Security Now. And the advertiser sends them the list of IP addresses of people who visited their site. The third party goes, okay, 32% of the people who heard the ad visited your site. They don't give the information to the advertiser. We don't get the advertiser's information.
So there's no matching of IPs.
It's only done by the third party in a private way. And, I resisted. But honestly, we would not be able to sell advertising. And that's the thing, the advertisers,
they're spoiled, right?
It's not even they're spoiled. They have a faith, a firmly held belief that this information helps them. And they refuse to buy they'll only buy ads where they can get that information. Frankly, we're lucky. We have a hard time selling ads against people like Google and Facebook, who will say, I can give you 25-year-old to 30-year-old men in Petaluma, California. Would you like that? Or I can give you people with income over $100,000 who live in the Northwest. Would you like that? We can't do that. You know, all we can say. So we are losing, frankly. We're losing out to Facebook and Google, which have about 80% of all the online ad sales, because they offer that kind of information. So they're going to keep doing it. And, you know, you see Google doing all sorts of maneuvers to get us to trust them. So they've turned off cookies, and we were talking the other day about this new web integrity initiative that they're proposing. They're going to build into Chrome. That's just one more way of them knowing who's there. And advertisers insist on it, so they think they have to do it. Whether anybody believes in it working, I don't know, but they think they have to do it. We have to do what we have to do, or we would have zero advertisers. As it is, we lose a lot of ads because we can't give them. You know, people just go, I'm going to buy Facebook or I'm going to buy Google.
Wow.
So some of our advertising, not so much on this show, but some of our advertising is now direct insertion, where we use a company, a Libsyn company called AdvertiseCast. We just started doing this, and we pause, put a little trigger in there, and they stick in an ad. And those advertisers like them a little bit better because they can geographically target. Your IP address has a rough geographic location. So when one of our shows airs in Spain, for instance, a Spanish advertiser will buy that, knowing that, well, because they don't want to buy U.S. listeners because they're not customers. Right. So they'll have an ad and they say, oh, we know these are the people who listen to this show in Spain. Here, you can have that. So it's another form of targeting. But, you know, advertisers, they demand it. And if you're an ad-supported media company, you have to find a way to balance we believe in our community, and especially your listeners. They don't want to be tracked.
No, and in this case, so we have Apple, who's trying to thwart the, surreptitious, underhanded device tracking. They have
all this ads themselves, this information themselves. So they have first, and this is what we were talking about earlier, as you heard on MacBreak Weekly, is first-party tracking like Facebook and Google and Apple do. And, of course, what they're really saying is we want this to ourselves. We don't want some app on your phone to have the information we have, the relationship with the customer we have. Yeah. They're not saying we don't want advertising and we don't want to track you. They're saying we don't want them to track you so we can. It's our advantage. So I'm cynical about this whole thing. Yeah.
Well, and there is a different form of tracking that you also touched on, and that's a more deliberate form, and that's back into the deep dive that we took a couple months ago on AirTag tracking technology.
Oh, yes.
As we know, this AirTag tracking technology is Bluetooth-based, so it's inherently crowdsourced. So this, of course, relates to the Apple and Google agreement. It's in both parties' interests, Apple and Google, to have a single common standard which they share, so that both Apple and Android handsets can provide the tracking location feedback for each other's ecosystems. So what they announced when we talked about this a couple of months ago was a joint specification, but it was really indistinguishable from what Apple had already been doing for several years with their AirTags. So what appeared to have actually happened was that, Apple had opened their specification for Google, and Google was happy to take it because, they already had an established ecosystem, and then people would be able to use their Android phones as track feedback devices as well. So it's good for everybody. Last Thursday's news is that Google would soon be adding unknown tracking alerts to Android. They said in their announcement, unknown tracker alerts, which we announced at I/O 2023, are beginning to roll out in Android 6.0 plus users this month. And they also said unknown tracker alerts currently work with Apple AirTags and, of course, other third-party tags. They said we'll continue to work with tag manufacturers to expand this important protection to other tracking tags over time. through our joint industry specification. Now, what you had seen was a story that said that was going to be put on hold to the end of the year, which, I mean, and I'm not sure if unknown tracking alerts, I mean, that's only, unknown tracking alerts is one aspect of the whole AirTag tracking. The other side being, you know, you own AirTags and your device is telling you where they're located. So that's different than being aware of an AirTag that is traveling with you. So maybe we're talking about two different things, or maybe we're talking about everything being on hold till the end of the year. Now I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I was fooled too, because the headline of the article I was reading said it's rolling out. And then the last paragraph of the article is, well, so Google announced it at Google I/O in May. I mean, the problem is you can have AirTags following you around unless you've installed an app on your Android phone. It doesn't know about AirTags.
Well, installed and it's running.
And it's running, and by the way, it doesn't work very well. So it was reasonable for Google and Apple to try to solve this problem by Google building it into Android and so forth. And so Google announced it in May that they were going to do this at Google I/O. They had thought they were going to put it in Android. I think is Android 14 is soon. But this article,
and I guess 6.0 is the kernel, kernel version.
So this article I'm reading along, and they're going to do it. They're going to do it. And then the last paragraph of the article is Google has announced it's putting this off until the end of the year because of the Apple-Google consortium. They want to work it out between the two of them. So I don't think it's in there now. I know I was very confused by this personally. So I don't. They've promised it, and we need it.
Well.
But is it here? I don't know.
Yeah, and so what I picked up on said, you know, are beginning to roll out to Android 6.0 plus users this month. So
I saw that too, and that was the same article that then said at the end of the article, well, except no. So
except not.
I'm very confused by the whole thing. Let me see if I can find the article I read, because I bet it was the same as the one you read. I bookmarked it in my thing here. And I think it was as if they had written the whole article and then did a nethermind on the whole thing. It was, so yeah, the headline of this article is, just as you said, Android will now warn about unknown Bluetooth trackers like AirTag traveling with you. Sarah Perez writing for TechCrunch, July 27th. Google today will begin to roll out a new safety feature, unknown traffic alerts. But then go down to the bottom, same article. Today, however, Google says this update is on hold.
Wow.
Wait a minute. Also announced, Google said it would update its... Okay, so I guess the alerts are there, but they are not updating the Find My network to work with third party. I guess that's what you said.
Okay.
So if you read this carefully, which I didn't apparently, the update that's on hold is updating Find My to work with third party trackers. So they are gonna, but then it says the decision was made to wait to roll out these updates because Google is now working in partnership with Apple to finalize the joint unwanted tracker alert specification by year end.
Wow, really confusing.
I think we are getting the alerts. I think it was just a poorly written article that we are getting the alerts.
I think that is right. It is that you will with Android 6.0 kernel, you'll begin to be told if something is traveling with you. The other stuff to come later.
Yeah,
and it says currently work with Apple AirTags. We will continue to work with tag manufacturers to expand this important protection. So I don't understand why it's not working with everybody, because you know. I thought this was already a unified standard. Yeah. But apparently not.
Also announced, Google said it would update its Find My Device network to help users locate other missing belongings, which can be located by third-party Bluetooth trackers. Now, Google doesn't sell a tracker, so anything Google works with is third-party, including AirTags, Tile, Chipolo.
And I would say they don't yet sell one because, boy, I'm astonished by how popular Apple AirTags are.
Yeah.
Remember,
they're dominant.
We shared the numbers. It was millions of them were selling.
Well, and the thing, I think really, there's lots of ways to track people.
And, there's one fewer AirTag in use now, Liam, after you
By the way, Bert gave me a much better hammer for next time I want to destroy something. I now have a mini sledgehammer. He didn't understand fully my plan.
Okay, so the National Defense Authorization Act, which successfully passed through the U.S. Senate last week, included a provision requiring the National Academy of Public Administration, whatever the hell that is, to conduct an assessment on the feasibility of establishing a new formal seventh branch of the U.S. military, which we've talked about several times, the U.S. Cyber Force. So this does appear to be happening, since many of our listeners have explained that wearing ridiculous camouflage clothing indoors is a bizarre requirement of the U.S. military. Now, that's my word, bizarre, not theirs. Perhaps at least the Cyber Force's camo could have, some cool cyber theme, like maybe like those green falling and fading symbols from the Matrix, or maybe just do the whole thing as in ones and zeros. That would be very cool, right? Like make camo out of ones and zeros.
Well, remember, anyway, it's supposed to be camo. I think, why can't they just make something that makes you invisible? I mean, let's do it.
That'd be really good.
Yeah.
Make a stealth camo. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I do hope that someone gives this as much thought and serious consideration as it is clearly needed, because the U.S. Cyber Force, if they're going to have to wear some ridiculous outfit, let's make it techie and cool.
So a number of our listeners are saying, including in the Discord, and somebody in the UK, that they do have these alerts now on their Android phone. So it did roll out. Yeah.
Yay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, users, listeners.
Super use for feedback. Yeah. Now, the other wrinkle is that both the Army and the Air Force, obviously well-established branches of the military, have recently created their own new specialized cyber teams to support their traditional kinetic teams, as we're calling them, with cyber tasks related to intelligence gathering, electronic warfare, and sensors. And I think that makes sense, since those cyber teams, which support the traditional kinetic forms of warfare, are probably going to be highly targeted and specialized for their specific tasks, whereas the military's new seventh branch would be far more wide-ranging, and not all focused upon specific current Army and Air Force military operations. So anyway, but through all this, it is quite obvious that cyber, I know you love that term standing by itself, Leo, cyber has well and truly arrived, both on the front lines and soon in dimly lit dens filled with monitors and empty caffeinated beverage cans. So
and pizza boxes.
I want to know what they're going to be wearing. That's all I'm saying. Is
we should explain.
For some reason this really matters to me.
We should explain that a couple of weeks ago, Steve found a photo of the Cyber Defense Command, and they were all wearing BDUs, battle dress uniforms, that were camouflaged, but obviously they're not in the jungle. So
they're in a room. They're not even, you can't even observe them from satellite reconnaissance.
We have to find some stealth uniforms for them.
Yeah.
Tempest uniforms.
So meanwhile, Russia continues to separate itself from the West. The Russian parliament just passed 3 bills, which, once signed into law by Putin, will ban Russian citizens from participating,
this is crazy,
in the activities of foreign nonprofit organizations that have not specifically registered with the Russian government, and none have. Commentary about this over on opennet.ru notes that an unintended side effect will be that Russians using open source software would be prevented from contributing in any way to those projects, even from submitting bug reports. Now, as we know, today's open source software includes Linux, Firefox, most major database systems, and programming languages. Now, I read the entire piece after having Google translate it into English for me, and it only talked about the unintended consequences. I was unable to determine what the intended consequences of the 3 pending bills would be. Why would Russia think this was a good idea?
I know one of the reasons repressive regimes pass bills like this is for selective prosecution. So, if they need a way to get you.
If they want to stomp on somebody, they have a law for
what's
it.
the copy of Linux doing there? You're in trouble, big boy. That kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine they want to stop all open source.
I mean, they're using it.
Yeah. The Russian official operating system is a Linux-based.
Yes, and there are lots of really good Russian teams that are doing good work.
Well, maybe that's who they're stomping on.
You want to check the source code, but still.
Yeah. Maybe that's what it's all about. It's kind of retaliation for the sanctions or something.
We don't want you to have any of our stuff. Right. So Virus Total is out with their look at 2023 to date. It's always interesting since they've got a good snapshot since everybody is submitting stuff to them. Whenever as I've mentioned before, when I download some old archive from some sketchy looking site, I immediately hand it to Virus Total to see what it thinks, just because it's better to be safe than sorry. So they get a really good snapshot of this. So they have some main takeaways from their most recent update. First of all, email attachments, to no one's surprise, continue to be the most popular way to spread malware. However, traditional file types, Excel, RTF, rich text format files, CAB, and compressed formats are becoming less popular. Although the use of PDFs slowly decreased for the last few months starting in June of 2023, the biggest peak in PDF usage was observed during 2023 compared to the previous 2 years. So PDFs are still a big deal just a little, maybe they're, a little summer slump for some reason. However, the big changes are in OneNote. OneNote and JavaScript, both distributed through HTML, are the most rapidly growing formats for malicious attachments in 2023, with OneNote emerging this year as a reliable alternative for attackers to the traditional use of macros in other Office products. Malicious OneNote files usually embed an additional malicious file. So OneNote is just sort of serving as a recognizable container that seems benign, and I guess it's, leave it to Microsoft. Their various security permissions allow OneNote to be opened when you click on something on a web page. So let's have OneNote bring it in. So the OneNote files usually embed an additional malicious file, VBA, HTML, and JavaScript, PowerShell, or some combination of those. And as happens with malicious Office attachments, the attempt is then made to convince the user to allow its execution. Payloads vary from one malware family to another, but many of them access external URLs to then download a DLL file, which is camouflaged as a .png, which is an old trick used to bypass simple firewall rules or just to appear less suspicious to anybody who knows to look. The most usual kill chain, as it was noted and stated, where OneNote format is involved, is 3 steps. The victim receives an email with a OneNote attachment. The mail body encourages the victim to click on a button to see a hidden or distorted image or document. Second, this button executes a script, VB script, a PowerShell, or whatever. And that will launch a payload either embedded into the same script or downloaded from an external resource. And then finally, the external payload might be yet another OneNote file, an image file renamed as a .bat file, a DLL that's loaded into memory, or even a Windows executable. So we have inherently dangerous capabilities mixed with social engineering attacks, and only one mistake made by one curious or inattentive employee within a major organization is all that's required to invite the malware in, to set up shop and who knows, contact a satellite internet provider in order to say, hey, I made it in. What do you want me to do? Following behind OneNote, ISO image files for malware are now a flexible alternative for both widespread and targeted attacks, and their distribution as heavily compressed attachments makes them difficult to scan by some security solutions. So says VirusTotal. ISO files are being disguised as legitimate installation packages for a variety of software, including Windows, Telegram, AnyDesk, and Crypto Notepad, among others. VirusTotal said that they said, quote, our data shows that there was an increase in the number of malicious files attached to emails between March and April of 2023. In terms of suspicious attachments, for the past 2 years, we have observed spikes in the number of suspicious PDF files linked to malicious campaigns. These files can be used for a variety of purposes, such as exploiting vulnerabilities or phishing, which is what happens most of the time. And they said during 2023 so far, they saw a significant increase in the use of JavaScript distributed alongside HTML, used in sophisticated phishing attacks, which were designed to steal victims' credentials, Excel, RTF, CAB, and compressed formats, as I mentioned before. And Word, interestingly, seem to be declining in popularity along with the others as malicious attachments compared to OneNote and JavaScript. So that's the wrap up on what's been happening so far in 2023.
Oh, hey, that's a really nice iPhone you have there. You totally picked the right color. Hey, since you do use an iPhone and maybe use an iPad or an Apple Watch or an Apple TV, well, you should check out iOS Today. It's a show that I, Micah Sargent, and my co-host Rosemary Orchard host every Tuesday right here on the TWiT network. It covers all things iOS, tvOS, HomePodOS, watchOS, iPadOS. It's all the OSs that Apple has on offer, and we love to give you tips and tricks about making the most of those devices, checking out great apps and services, and answering your tech questions. I hope you check it out.